Good afternoon. Welcome to our latest live BSIA broadcast, Security Personnel Return to Normality, which is very kindly been sponsored by Innovice. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Tom Ford, the Membership Development Manager at the BSIA, and for the next 30 minutes we're going to be focusing on the future role of the security officer and the businesses who employ them, which will be discussed today by our panel of experts from across the security industry who have kindly given up their time to impart their knowledge on this vitally important subject. So today, as part of the BSIA's campaign, The Hidden Workforce, that we are running in conjunction with the Security Commonwealth and the Security Institute, and it aims to reset the perceptions of the security officers in the public eye. Our broadcast is going to be focusing on the three following points. Has the image of the security officer changed since the commencement of COVID-19? What can our industry do to support blue light and frontline services moving forward? And how do we turn the reality of the professionalism of the work our officers and the companies they represent into a positive public perception? So after hearing from our panelists, we will be opening the floor to questions which you can start sending now for me to line up after our discussion. Should be no more than 20 to 30 minutes. And you can also open discussion as well during the debate in the chat option to the right. And we'll be releasing a recording of this and a write-up of the broadcast after the event. So before we start, I'd like each guest to introduce themselves and to give a brief overview of their specialism and what they'd like to talk about today. So Russell, if I could start with you, please.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Russell Kerr. I'm the Managing Director here at Security Group. We're an SI approved contractor ranked in the top 5% of the scheme and an Invested in People Gold organisation that employs 2,500 excellent people across the UK and Ireland. We specialise in the provision of specialist security services and electronic solutions, and I'm looking forward to the debate and delighted to be here.
Wonderful, thanks very much. Ian?
Good afternoon, Tom. Afternoon, everybody. And my name's Ian Todd. I'm the Chief Executive of the Security Industry Authority. So we are the statutory regulator of the private security industry across the UK. We are responsible for ensuring the protection of the public and improving standards across the industry, which we predominantly do through the setting of entry standards into the profession, which leads to the licensing of individuals and setting standards for our approved contractor scheme, which Russell's already alluded to. In terms of my specialist area, I suppose it would be regulation in general. My first career was in the ambulance service, including being as a paramedic. So I hope I've got an empathy with what it's like to be on the front line, dealing with the public in that kind of role. But I moved into regulation around about 10 years ago, and that's where I've been ever since. And my interest is making sure that we are a risk-based, proportionate regulator, and our approach is the right one to ensure that the industry continues to grow and flourish in the future.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much, Ian. And last but very much not least, Tony.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tony Cockcroft. I'm here in my capacity as Chairman of the Security Officer Section of the British Security Industry Association and Vice Chairman of the British Security Industry Association. I have 20 years experience in the security industry, predominantly in the provision of specialist security officers.
Wonderful, thanks very much. So thank you for everyone's introductions then. And I'd like to start by discussing how we see the role of the security officer post-COVID-19. So my first question is to Ian. What do you think will be the requirements of the public protection post-COVID-19? And has this changed significantly since relaxing lockdown?
I think it's a good question, but I think we need to be quite clear. We're not out of COVID-19 yet, and we don't know what being out of it will look like in terms of what the long-term consequences might be of the change to the way that the public operates, the way that businesses operate, and over what kind of time frame. I think the key is going to be around flexibility and adaptability, and I think the changes are going to be both subtle and significant at the same time, and that sounds like a contradiction, but you know, the security of people, of premises, of property remains broadly the same. So conceptually what people are doing is very similar, but the way in which that's done is going to be significantly different, at least in the short term. So, you know, the management of people, security of people, for example, when we're looking at managing queues outside of venues is very different, because now we're talking about socially distanced queues of people who are 2 meters apart, as opposed to throngs of crowds of people trying to push their way through the front door of a nightclub on a Friday or Saturday evening. So, you know, there are some real differences in how the role is going to be delivered. How much of that is about a health screening role? How much of it is about you know, security in the more traditional sense? So I think the world will be a slightly different place, and that will be require flexibility, adaptability on the part of everybody. We've seen parts of the industry decimated because of the closure of the nighttime economy. We've seen other parts of the industry really flourish, with supermarket, food supply chain, and kind of other areas of security operations. So, you know, there have been positives and negatives for different players in this in this space. So those people buying security are in a different place in terms of what they need. The businesses supplying that security, having to take much more complex decisions, with different types of risk assessment, different kind of management decisions, and the individual security officers themselves having to do things in a different way. So, you know, I think we're definitely moving into a different place, but some of the challenges remain the same, and some of them are exacerbated. So if you think about the growing role of security officers in the counter-terrorism agenda, for example, all of a sudden we've got lovely queues of people lined up along the side of the high street at 2 meter intervals from one another. If I were minded to be driving a vehicle down that road, it presents an opportunity for me if I have terrorist intent. So being able to manage that queue in a health conscious way, whilst also playing into the counter-terrorism agenda, is going to make people's lives more complex and you know, multifaceted. So I think there will be some changes, but the core purpose remains the same. The core skills, the core training, you know, the communication skills, all of those things remain the same. So the foundation is strong, but the focus might change slightly.
It's really interesting. Thank you, Ian. Thank you for that. Really appreciate it. So, Tony, over to you then. As a business owner, do you think the role of our officers in terms of what they'll need to deal with have changed because of COVID-19? Do you think this change has been happening for quite a while?
Yeah, I think the change has been happening for quite a while. The level of professionalism of security officers has increased steadily over the past 10 years, and the sorts of work that they've had to do. There are certain things, as Ian has suggested, that have changed as a direct result of COVID-19. The positives out of that, of the provision of specialist security officers, are we have been able to prove our adaptability and the capabilities that our frontline security officers have. And examples of that are, during the COVID crisis, distribution of PPE to people who are entering food distribution sites and logistics sites, computer temperature controlled and thermometer checks by security officers before people enter site, because these really are the frontline people before people enter a client premises. And I think that will continue to change over time. We have, for people who provide retail security officers, we're going to have from the 24th of July, where people, it is going to be mandatory that they wear face masks before entering shops and premises. So there's going to be additional challenges for our frontline workforce during this time. As Ian said, I don't think we are out of COVID at all. The scientists are suggesting that there may be a second spike over the winter, and I think that will cause additional challenges, which our frontline security officers will have to adapt to. But we are there. We're embracing those challenges, and to be frank with you, we're embracing the chance to actually show what our frontline officers are capable of and the professionalism of them.
Well said, Tony. Appreciate it. So Russell, welcome. So my question to you, Russell, is with the role of the officer changing, do you think this will lead to a further need for adaptability within the industry as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Our industry has been recognised quite rightly as a key support to government and the police. And with the help of the SIA, the BSIA, the Security Institute, and I'm sure many others, our frontline colleagues have been recognised as key workers. And I think during this pandemic, we've all found ourselves undertaking assignments that are out of the ordinary. But that's because we've responded to the needs of society. We've developed and deployed our expertise in crowd flow to develop one-way systems and shopping centres and department stores. And as Ian alluded to, we are using our stewarding and queue management skills to they're being put to good use outside supermarkets and outside transport hubs. And we've also introduced cutting edge technology into the mix to provide clients with extra layers of due diligence in the form of either thermal screening cameras and density monitoring systems. So I think we've demonstrated how flexible and adaptable our security businesses can be. And I'm convinced that we'll continue to provide value to our communities and to the wider society as we pull through to the other side of this pandemic.
Brilliant. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. So with the role of the officer changing, not just through the demands of COVID-19, but through technology, customer service requirements, health and safety, the role is clearly evolving. So the next set of questions are really going to be around what is the industry doing to make security a career of choice? So I'd like to ask my next question to Tony. Tony, how are we attracting people into the industry so we can showcase that being a security officer isn't just the last option, as it may have been viewed in the past? Tony, you're on mute.
My apologies. Thank you for that, Tom. I think there's several facets to that. As I said earlier, the role of the security officer has changed and the level of professionalism has changed certainly over the past 10 years. But the work, especially that's being done by the BSIA and Skills for Security in creating national occupational standards in conjunction with colleges and the work that David and his team at Skills for Security are doing, is certainly going to lead to that additional level of professionalism within the industry. And I also think that as a result of what's happened recently with COVID and the way in which our security officers have adapted, that the public perception has changed and security is starting to be seen truly for the profession that it actually is, and that it's not just a job and it can be a professional career for people to enter.
Well said. Thanks, Tony. So Ian, as the regulator of the industry, what can be done to make security a more accessible and attractive career option?
So I think I mean, that's two different questions in a way. Accessibility and an attractive career aren't necessarily the same thing. So I think, we need to be very careful. Our role is as a regulator. We have a very clear, defined statutory remit, and I am obliged to comply with the legislation that's there and the obligations that puts upon us. But that doesn't mean we don't have a role to play. In terms of accessibility, then we need to make sure that we are not a barrier to entry to the profession for those who want to join. So, for example, during the pandemic, we've been able to work with a number of awarding organisations, other parts of the sector, to create online qualifications. So the vast majority of qualifications that have been delivered during the pandemic have, because of social distancing, not been delivered physically. They've had to be delivered through online platforms. That creates sort of greater accessibility. People don't have to travel, people don't have to attend courses, save in some areas where it can't be done online. So physical intervention, for example, cannot be delivered online, but most of security guarding, for example, CCTV, can be done using remote facilities where necessary. So we've done a lot of work there to make it more accessible. We continue to try and drive the cost of a license down. We've seen 2 reductions in the last 6 months in the amount that's paid by individual license applicants. So we want to increase accessibility through that route. During the pandemic, again, we've tried to make the licensing process as easy as possible. So we've moved away from using the post office as much to validate primary identity documents. Those are reliant on changes in other parts of the system and other government sort of procedures, and we will push to keep that as simple and as straightforward as we can in the longer term. There's no guarantee of that, so we might have to revert some of it, but we, as a regulator, we have learned a lot. Like many other businesses, we had to go remote and virtual almost overnight, and that's meant some changes to our processes, which I hope have made things quicker and easier for people in the main, and we would want to retain out of the back of this. But that's about accessibility, and the risk of accessibility is you can make it too easy. What we don't want is a large number of people who get licenses who actually have no interest in the profession, have no interest in a career, in some instances have no interest in actually working off of the back of that license. They've done it for other reasons, often promoted by other parts of the public sector, I have to say. So we would take the criticism there. In terms of making it an attractive career, then, as Tony has already alluded to, work with the BSIA, with skills for security, creating that skills board, looking at apprenticeships, looking at routes through from entry through a career path, so that somebody can see the future of it. When we get students gaining licenses because they want to do events over the summer, what we want for them to be thinking is, as a university student, if I stick in this profession, I could be running a small, medium-sized business. I could be a director of a large business. I could be the chief executive of a major multinational corporation if I stay in this industry and work my way through. And that is a valid route. And I would look at my own experience. I joined the ambulance service to treat patients as a paramedic. I left as a director, that kind of career path opportunity needs to be as obvious to somebody joining the security profession as it was to me when I joined the ambulance service however many years ago.
Thank you, Ian. I really appreciate the answers there. Russell, over to you then. So from your perspective, what are the benefits to someone looking to work in the industry? What do you think is being done to attract school leavers or even second career candidates into the industry?
Well, I think Ian used the word career, and for me, career is the operative word here. We need to make a security job a security career, or indeed a second career. Therefore, I think the career pathway has to be attractive from the outset. We have to set out and really sell what the prospects for progression are, what the career development pathway is going to look like, and what training opportunities and what skills that they're likely to learn on the way. And I think as organisations, we need to embrace development and progression, even if it costs us, because there is always a risk that we're going to lose some of that great talent, whether it be to a client, a competitor, or even another sector. And of course, this can be painful, but if we are developing our people at every level, there should be someone with the skills that is keen to step forward and take that opportunity on when the opportunity presents itself. But you mentioned about new entrants. A key driver at Security Group is about attracting new entrants and new talent. And I think when the apprentice levy was first introduced, the industry seemed surprised that there wasn't an apprenticeship for us to enrol candidates on. And it was simply a case of the industry just didn't take the time to develop one. So I've been involved in a project with other security businesses in Scotland from across the industry, and with the support of the BSIA and our sector skills body, Skills for Security, to develop an apprenticeship. And I'm pleased to say that we're now in a pretty advanced position, and we should have an apprenticeship programme ready in the autumn. And I know that my colleagues from our training and development team are also supporting efforts with a trailblazer group in England and Wales as well. And the government has only just recently announced financial support for apprenticeships, funding of, I think, £2,000 for an apprentice under 25 and £1,500 for those that are over 25. And as an industry, we need to be taking advantage of the support that's out there and in turn doing our bit for the youth of society.
Yeah, thank you for that, Russell. I think there's going to be a lot of people that are interested in what you just said. So I mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast that the BSIA is leading on resetting the perception of the security officer within with its Hidden Workforce campaign. So we launched that in June, and I want to ask the panel their thoughts in and around this campaign. So Ian, my question to you is, how does the SIA, as the regulator, support a campaign that wants to see the industry as something embedded into the public consciousness?
So I think we absolutely do support that campaign, and we've been very grateful to be involved behind the scenes, talking with BSIA, Security Commonwealth, Security Institute, and being able to feed into some of that work. As I alluded to earlier, we also need to be slightly careful as a regulator because of the remit that we have. We're not in a position to lobby. We are not a trade association. We're not a membership body in that sense. In the way that sort of a professional association, a kind of a trade union might be. So we need to play our part, but we need to make sure that we do that in a way that's appropriate as a public sector statutory regulator. Actually, in terms of the public consciousness, I mean, the opportunity is now. I cannot think of a time in all of my years of working in the public sector where at 8 p.m. on an evening on a weekly basis, people were coming out of their houses and clapping their support for key workers. And I know the focus was very heavily around the NHS originally, then expanding to care workers, but then broadening out to key workers. And actually the role of private security during the pandemic has really been brought forward to the public's attention. The Prime Minister specifically mentioned the role of security officers in one of his national addresses, and I think the public perception of the value that some of these professions add has really shifted with the nature of COVID-19. We're not all sitting there thinking about the 7-figure salary bankers. We're sitting there thinking about the nurses, the doctors, the care workers, the security officers. So the time very much is now, and we were really pleased. And as we went into lockdown, there was some real debates about what is a key worker, what is an essential worker, who falls into that category, and working with others, it was quite easy to determine that those who were providing roles critical to national infrastructure, so security at NHS sites, supermarkets, the food supply chain, absolutely no doubt about it. But then this wider role, and I know we'll come on to this in a later question, about if somebody is guarding an empty office, for example, is that protecting it from crime such that you are not going to start needing the police to respond to people breaking into those offices, and they can be used more effectively for other things. And I was really fortunate to be able to have a conversation directly with the Home Secretary and able to put that point to her. And I have to say, without hesitation, she said, absolutely, that meets what she believed to be the definition of a key worker. Being able to work in a role that had a high potential to avert additional workload on policing was something that she thought was absolutely meeting that need. So the consciousness of the role of private security is not just in the public eye, it is right the way up to the most senior levels of political engagement. And I think it's now about making sure we build on that, we take it forward, and the work that Mike Reddington and everyone at BSIA is doing, supported by Guy Mathias, by Jane King at Security Commonwealth, Rick Mountfield at Security Institute and others. Absolutely, this is the right time, because in terms of public consciousness and the recognition of the role that security have played during the pandemic and will continue to play as we come out of lockdown, this is not an opportunity to be missed.
No, agreed. It's it really feels like we're all part of something quite special at the moment. So it's something really fantastic to be part of. Russell, I want to talk to you around how you think the public see the role of the security officer, and it'd be good to get understand your company's experience of it as well. So, how do you think the public view the security officer? For those who are aware of what they do, is it still in a negative or grudging light?
Well, I think there are probably two perceptions that need to be addressed here. There's the perception of the industry itself and of our people or our colleagues who work within it. And I think the important thing for us all to remember is that the industry has made really significant progress over the last 10 or 15 years. And in my view, regulation has, without a shadow of a doubt, improved the private security industry. We now have nationally approved qualifications, a UK-wide licensing system, and we've an approved contractor scheme. And as an organisation now, we very rarely come across companies who are ACS, and that's a really big tick for me. I really support the perceptions campaign that's been championed by the BSIA and others. Not sure I completely agree with the description of security personnel as a hidden workforce, because in my view, our people are absolutely front and centre. We are often the face of multinational corporations. As we manage their receptions, we're entrusted to make those vital first impressions. We're checking passengers onto aircraft or welcoming them off cruise liners. We're reassuring customers as they enter shopping centres and department stores. And we are everywhere at sports grounds, concerts and music festivals. At least we are normally. Our security vehicles are visible and patrolling building portfolios and industrial estates. And for me, as operators, we have an obligation to improve perceptions by focusing on some of the basics, whether it's image, uniform, posture, professional standards, and engagement with the public. And I think as leaders and managers, we need to encourage professionalism, challenging poor standards, training our people to be helpful and empathetic, customer focused and non-confrontational. And we need to prepare our people for emergencies and how they will deal with them. We need to continually test their experience through tabletop exercises and constant scenario training. And I tuned into the BSIA's virtual awards the other month, and I thought it was absolutely excellent. And our industry and our people are doing absolutely extraordinary things. And we should encourage all of our people to aspire to do the same, and then perhaps the perception issue will partly take care of itself.
Thank you, Russell. Much appreciated. Okay then. So finally, Tony, as chairman of the Security Officer Services section, what can we do as an industry to get behind this campaign? Our members and the wider industry have some fantastic examples, as Russell mentioned and as highlighted at the British Security Awards. But this is only being recognised by our own audience. So my question is, how can the wider industry get behind the campaign? What can we do as the BSIA to further this, keep driving forward?
Okay, first and foremost, and Ian alluded to it when he was talking, is I'd like to say that the work that the BSIA did, and with the support of the SIA, to actually obtain key worker status for people working in the private security industry was a very key moment. Timing is everything, and what we now need to do is ensure that that momentum that we have raises the profile of the private security industry. Within the BSIA, and it's the first time that I have known it in my time working in the industry, not just the BSIA, but we now have this united voice along with the Security Institute, with Rick, with the Security Commonwealth, with Guy, that we are all of one voice to raise the perception of the private security industry. To that end, within the BSIA, we have wrote to senior government ministers, explaining to them what we're trying to do as an association. And I think it's never been more important that a security company, and a reputable security company, is a member of the BSIA. And Mike will use his mantra of be a member, not an observer. And to work within the British Security Industry Association, along with our partners in the Security Institute and the Security Commonwealth, as Ian said, with a degree of support from our regulator in the Security Industry Authority, to actually make sure that the perception of the security industry is raised to the level of professionalism that it actually deserves within the public perception of our industry. We know how professional we are in our industry. We're very good at telling ourselves how professional we are, but we have to project that image to the wider public. So we will continue to work within the BSIA, promoting our industry to all people externally, and keep doing that in conjunction with our partners to ensure that we use this very specific time frame that we have as a united voice for our industry.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tony. I think you've all answered that question really well, and I think from the BSI perspective, we called it the hidden workforce to highlight that we're resetting perceptions to make sure that they are no longer hidden. So I'd like to ask a single question to each member of the panel now, see whether we've got some time to take any questions sent in to us. So turning to you first, Ian, what can the security industry do to support blue light and frontline services moving forward?
So I don't think it's a question about what the security industry can do. I think it's about what they are already doing, and it's about extending that, expanding it, and getting a degree of consistency around it. So so during the pandemic, I've been very lucky to be able to go back and do some volunteering back with the ambulance service. You know, the private security industry, the role that they play outside of the A&E department, for example, is already fundamentally important. The role that, as I've already alluded to, that private security are playing in diverting or preventing crime, and therefore diverting demand on policing, again recognised up to and including by the Home Secretary. If you look at certain areas, people will always say the City of London is slightly different, but the City Security Council, for example, the collaborative working between the City of London Police, the Met Police, private security, multi-agency scenarios around counter-terrorism exercises that were being run before the pandemic. There are a number of examples around the country of really great integration between private security and policing, and that's not putting policing roles at risk. It's not privatising the police service. It's about working collaboratively and using the different skill sets that people have in the most appropriate way. I don't want to steal, Russell's thunder, but some of the work that's going on, and people will argue sometimes it can be easier in the devolved administrations because you have a single government, you have a single police service, but some of the work that Russell and other private security partners have been doing with policing across the central belt of Scotland, and how they would support in the event of a major incident, particularly counter-terrorism related major incident. Some fantastic examples already out there around how private security are supporting blue light services. What we need to do is continue to talk to the National Police Chiefs Council, to other senior influencing bodies, to make sure that we take that best practice and that we can bring the other parts of the country up to wherever it's already performing. There will always be local tailoring, there will always be local needs that are different, so we won't have the same solution everywhere, but what we need to be having is the same quality of conversation everywhere about what that partnership looks like going forward. If we can get the rest of the country up to the level that we're seeing in some parts of it, then we are in a really, really good place. And that's, you know, that's what I and others will be working very hard with some of those other blue light partners to achieve.
Great. Thank you very much. So Tony, I'm going to get this question right. So should we have a national pandemic response association consisting of APCC, NPCC, BSIA, SIA, GMC, and other relevant organisations? And how do you think this would work?
I think what this pandemic has proven to us is that initially we were unprepared as a country. And we know that we're not out of COVID. We know there is a chance, looking at other European countries and countries in the world, that there may well be a second spike. And I think if we did have that National Pandemic Association, including all key workers, and now we've established that the private security industry are key workers, that it would certainly enable us to mobilise and initialise a response far quicker than we were able to do on this occasion. And by doing that, hopefully, as our role within the private security industry, we would be able to continue to protect people, protect property, and ultimately, with a rapid response through a National Pandemic Association, protect lives. So I think it would be an excellent idea, and I think it's something that we will potentially be working on within the BSIA to look at how we can contribute to that.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, well, thank you, panelists. Oh, actually, I've got another question, beg your pardon. Russell, when will the public sector, okay, I'll ask a question. When will the public sector procure security services on quality and not price?
Thanks, Tom. I thought this might come up because I saw Brian Sims on the chat there asking or making a similar point. I think the quality and price debate is probably not one that's just exclusive to the public sector. I think it exists in every facet of the private sector too. We've all been unsuccessful in a tender when we knew that the key driver was price. And I've been in presentations where the buyer has even alluded to how unhappy they are with the incumbent provider, only to find out that they've renewed purely on price anyway. Look, we will always have competition at the lower end of the price spectrum, and that's just the market. My advice to my own colleagues is to focus on our own high standards, our quality of service delivery, because that is what buyers who recognise quality really do appreciate. And I think the best way to influence buyers who are compelled to buy on price is to show them what the difference will be. We need to be innovative in our approach, and we need to clearly differentiate ourselves as a quality provider, partly to show them what they're going to be missing out on.
Wonderful. Right, thank you very much, panelists. I've had some excellent insight today. It's been incredibly informative. I've certainly felt that it has been as well. So I've got some questions here, but we've had quite a lot of them as well. And I think what's probably going to be more beneficial to gain sort of succinct answers are going to be for me to actually put them to the panel afterwards, and just to give a write-up and send them out to you as well. So I'm going to leave it there for the day. In closing, I'd just like to say thank you very, very much to Ian, Russell and Tony for their invaluable insight, and to thank our sponsors Innovise, and to everyone who's tuned in today. We've had some excellent responses, some excellent interest, and it's been a really interesting project to be a part of. So if you want to find out more about Hidden Workforce campaign, today's broadcast, or membership with the BSIA, then I'm going to be sending out a doodle poll with some times, so we can arrange some time to speak individually next week. Our industry has developed vastly in the last 10 years. And as we start a new decade and some unprecedented challenges appear to be ahead, but there's also going to be opportunities. And I'm confident that by working together, we can showcase our security officers as a respected valued professional service provider contributing to and creating a safe and secure environment, critical to protecting places, property, and most importantly, people. A key worker that is acknowledged and embedded in our daily lives. So once again, thank you very much, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. Thank you.